Hey, sister.
Hey, sister.
Join me, Courtney Lewis,
And me, Carly Ferguson,
in our conversational podcast about everyday situations.
You can count on us to tell it to you straight with our own sisterly spin.
Consider this a phone call with your own Southern sisters as we discuss with you personal accountability, healthy relationships, managing responsibilities, and contributing to society.
Each episode will consist of straight talk and a call to action.
Your sisters are calling.
Thanks for answering. Welcome to Hey Sister. This is episode 25, Hostess with the Mostess. This month, we're feeling vacation ready. We're almost to the end of the school year, so it's time to plan and get excited for those summer trips. Today's episode is the second in our Vacation Ready series, and we'll be talking about Airbnbs. This is something that I'm really excited to talk about as a recent Airbnb host myself, and someone who loves staying at Airbnbs. Before we get going on today's topic, sisters, didn't you just love last week's episode with Madeline? If you haven't listened to that yet, we highly recommend it, as it will get you feeling all the summer vacation vibes. We also remind you that every episode of Hey Sister contains show notes that include our weekly call to action, a minute marker timeline, and links to any resources or websites we refer to.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get rolling. I'm going to start by taking you back in time. 12 years ago, my husband and I were newlyweds, finishing our bachelor's degrees at Utah State University. We were too cheap to pay for flights to visit my family in Texas, so when I wanted to go visit family, it became a 22-hour-long road trip. The route we took traveled through New Mexico, and we would joke to ourselves that we would never, ever live there because we were so disgusted by the gas stations and other businesses right off the main highway. Although our car trip wasn't entirely filled with disgust, as we also got quite a few chuckles at the names of hotels and restaurants along the way, names like Nuttin' Fancy Diner and It'll Do Motel, complete with colored TV and mini fridge. Well, flash forward a few years from those road trips, and we would surprisingly be calling the Land of Enchantment, aka New Mexico, home. We ended up living in Carlsbad and Las Cruces, New Mexico, for a good chunk of our early marriage, and we made some incredible lifelong friendships during that time. One such friendship was with Courtney and Garrett Sandberg. There are some people you just instantly click with in life, and the Sandbergs were one of them. They were married the same year as my husband and I, in fact, even within a week of our wedding date, and at the time we met them, we were both struggling with pregnancy-related issues and trying to figure out what the future held for us. Little did we know, we'd both move from Carlsbad, New Mexico, grow our families, and then reconnect in Arizona years later. So now that you've gotten a little backstory about how I know Courtney Sandberg, our guest expert today, let me introduce her to our sisterhood as the Airbnb expert that she is, and not just as a personal friend. Courtney is a wife and mother of 3 incredible kiddos and an Airbnb host. She lives with her family just outside of Phoenix in Gilbert, Arizona, and currently hosts one Airbnb in Scottsdale. Although I imagine that number will continue growing as she and her husband are involved in real estate and remodeling and renting homes together. Unlike the It'll Do Motel I referenced earlier, the reviews on hers and her husband's Airbnb are raving, with comments like, fantastic place to stay, the best Airbnb we've ever rented, just what the doctor ordered, beyond comfortable, and my personal favorite review, I wish all Airbnbs were like this. Although I've not stayed at Courtney's Airbnb yet, I have been a guest at her home a couple of times and can attest to the fact that she is in fact the hostess with the mostest, thinking of little details that mean so much when you're staying away from your own home. Courtney is incredibly thoughtful and intuitive with her home hostessing, and I think I've made her wait long enough to talk. So Courtney, welcome to Hey Sister.
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited you're here.
It might be a little confusing having 2 Courtneys around me again.
Right.
But Courtney S., could you explain the difference between an Airbnb and a hotel? Which do you prefer and why?
Yeah. As far as hotels go, I think most of us are probably familiar with hotels since they were basically our only options for travel before companies like Airbnb became popular. We know that they can range from bare bones, cheap hotels, those motels like Courtney was talking about, to very fancy and luxurious hotels that offer a complete experience where you don't even have to leave the hotel premises to capture a whole vacation. And then there's everything in between that range. The same is fairly true for Airbnbs. Airbnbs are actual homes that you can rent, and they vary just like hotels do. There are very basic Airbnbs. There are small ones with very few amenities to some really nice, essentially mansion type ones that have several rooms. My brother and sister-in-law recently rented a place in Las Vegas with their family, and it had everything: a theater, arcade room, sports courts, pools, so many accommodations. And there are places that are specifically created for events like that. So you've got that range of Airbnbs where you have simple houses all the way up to super fancy places that are meant for events and everything in between there. They both definitely serve a purpose and are great. It just comes down to asking yourself what you want out of your trip and then choosing an Airbnb or a hotel based on that. For example, if I'm going on a trip with just my husband and I'm 100% choosing a hotel, because the space works great for just two people and I want a break from the day-to-day chores. I am a mom that is home cooking and cleaning all the time. I want housekeeping to come in, to make my bed, to bring me fresh towels, to order room service if I want when I'm hungry. I don't get those luxuries at home. So when I'm on a vacation with just the two of us, I would totally choose a hotel. But if I'm planning a trip with my husband and kids, a hotel is iffy because it gets complicated when you're trying to put an entire family in a single room with two beds and you've got kids that don't usually sleep in the same room together and you're trying to get everybody to bed at the same time and mom and dad aren't ready to go to bed yet and we're just laying with the kids and you're trying to be silent or you've got the white noise on super loud and everyone's crying and everyone wakes up at different times and it's a nightmare. At that point, you're like, we're definitely too big to stay in one room. So you upgrade to like a suite so you can have multiple rooms and have a living space. But then at that point, why are you not just choosing an Airbnb? Why are you picking a hotel? You're getting more bang for your buck if you choose an Airbnb because with that extra space, it's much more homey. You have a full kitchen, so you don't have to eat out all the time. You've got a living room. You have individual rooms where you can put kids in different places. If I'm planning a big trip with my extended family where we've got multiple families that are all trying to stay together in one place, 100% we are doing an Airbnb. And Airbnbs are great for groups, and this is one of the appeals for Airbnbs. They've got a fully stocked kitchen with all the cooking supplies that you would need, so you don't have to eat out every meal. You can go to Costco or Sam's Club, pick up and restock. I know Courtney loves Sam's Club.
Yeah, thank you.
I go to Costco. She goes to Sam's Club. Anyway, get a bunch of food, stock up, and make food while you're there. You've got space for the kids to run around. Maybe they have a backyard that has space. Some places, depending on where you go, have different games and activities, different amenities. We recently went to Florida. They had boogie boards and sand toys and chairs and all of the things that you would need for the area. And obviously, the main thing is that it's cheaper to split the bill between multiple people. And it's good for longer stays too. So you don't get sick of being at a hotel. An Airbnb just feels more homey and it's nice. I think you just evaluate what you're wanting out of your trip and then you can choose an Airbnb or a hotel based on that. That's how it works for me.
I feel the same way. And I think Airbnb has come a long way. It used to be just the official way to couch surf. And now, like you said, there are just so many options. My husband and I, like my first experience with Airbnb was actually in the Czech Republic. And it was really good. I think when I told Courtney that we were doing that, she thought I was insane. And
I did.
like worried for our safety. But we were like, yeah, it's going to be great. And
I thought you were staying at like a hostel. I did not understand what an Airbnb was.
And see, it was awesome. I'm so glad we did it that way because it felt like you were really in the area you were staying in. You were really a part of the culture in a way. Like you were seeing how they decorated their space that was so different than maybe what you would decorate it yourself, wherever you're from. So even those little differences help so much to feel like you're not just traveling, you're, like you said, getting a little glimpse into the area and feeling connected that way. But that's something we've really enjoyed about it.
I remember when Carly was going to the Airbnbs in the Czech Republic when her and her husband were going, and I was very caught off guard by that because that's just something that I had never done at that point. And Carly actually does a lot of things before I do them. I feel like I'm very much a traditionalist minimalist. I'm set in my ways. And so I take a while to convert to new technology. I mean, Carly will tell you she was using the iPhone long before I was and had to strong arm me. And Courtney could say the same thing. Like both of them were telling me for years, quit making our text thread green. It takes me a while to convert and to try Airbnbs. And now I do love Airbnbs. I do feel a little bit of the odd man out though in this conversation, in this trio, because Carly and Courtney are both hosts of Airbnbs. So Courtney, could you share some of the lessons that you've learned during the process of becoming an Airbnb host?
Sure. We actually bought the property that we have now for our Airbnb as a house that we were going to flip. Our intention was to go in and flip the property, and we did part of the renovations. And then we realized that it was a really prime location in Scottsdale and that we could maybe do an Airbnb. Finally, we were like, okay, let's just go for it and do it. So we, from like start to finish, did an Airbnb, and I've learned so many things. The most significant realization I came to is your Airbnb isn't meant for everyone. When I was about 3/4 of the way through the project and I was on the verge of losing my mind over researching every item in the house to death, I was talking to my mom and she just said those words. She was like, your Airbnb isn't meant for everyone. And somehow, I don't know why I hadn't realized that before, but it was like this weight was lifted off my chest. And it obviously didn't make all the stress of it disappear. But for the first time, I felt like I had permission to just let the Airbnb be what I wanted and know that it was okay if it wasn't what everyone was looking for.
As you're saying that about your Airbnb might not be for everyone, one of our few Airbnb experiences, we were staying in Roswell, New Mexico at an Airbnb, because remember, I don't stay at the It'll Do Motel in New Mexico. So we stayed at this Airbnb in New Mexico, and next door was the house of the owner who owned the rental house. And I don't know if the husband was a pastor or if she was like a youth church leader. She was just a very religious person. And from the moment we got there, she was so intent on inviting me to come to her Bible study at the next door house. But we were there for the night. We just wanted to leave the next morning. We were there for a very short time, but we got in and she's messaging me trying to find out when we're going to be there. I mean, the nicest lady probably ever, but I made it the whole time without seeing her because I was like, Cam, I'm in my pajamas. I don't want to meet people. Literally trying to attend a Bible study is the last thing I want to do right now because we want to be in and out and get home. It was just a super quick trip, but she was so sweet and wanting to talk to me. And I'm sure that as a host, she probably thought I was such a rude guest because she was trying so hard to invite me and be a friend. And I wish she would take your advice that your Airbnb might not be for everyone. And she was so thoughtful, but I reviewed her place and gave her a 5-star review and said all the things that she was great at. And then she reviewed me, and her review of me as a guest was, I got to meet the family, but I didn't ever get to meet the wife. And I was like, no, oh, sorry. You could tell that she was so hurt. So anyway, I feel like that goes on both sides. You want to be a great host, but as a guest too, like you have to do what works for you and don't take it too personally if what you're wanting doesn't match up with what the host was offering.
See, that's so interesting because I hear that story with maybe a different ear. As a host, we have a very different type of Airbnb, I'd say, than to Courtney here. We have a long-term rental, so it's month to month that we rent our Airbnb. So I think it differs slightly, but with my experience for Airbnb, I really appreciate the no contact approach. Like that it's there and they feel connected, but it is much more relaxed and private than a hotel would be. That's something that Airbnbs offer. So that's something like I appreciate, even though we live on the property, the same property as the unit that we have for the Airbnb, we don't really interact much with our renters or the tenants. We come in contact with them on occasion and we're very pleasant. And when we need to share information, we do. But we're careful to be maybe too involved because we understand that they have their own plans, like you having your own things going on when you're coming into the area. So I don't know how you felt about that, Courtney, as you listened to the other Courtney.
Yeah. So I was thinking you just need to have some boundaries. You kind of can feel that out as you communicate with the people initially. So we have a lot higher turnover rate. We have people that stay 2 days and we've had people that stay up to 3 weeks. So it just depends. Garrett, my husband, is the one who actually does most of the communicating online. I am not great with technology and responding to messages. I wait weeks to text people back. So that does not work to become a super host with Airbnb. Garrett is always on his computer, so he is awesome. And so he responds to people really promptly and he fills it out. We give them all the information that they need. He'll always check in the day that they come, and then we'll kind of fill it out from there. If people talk to us, he'll totally respond back. If people don't say anything, he'll wait a couple days and then check in and be like, hey, just wanted to make sure everything's going well. Definitely not inviting them to things with us personally, though. That is crossing a boundary, in my opinion, that is not really what you want to do as an Airbnb host. People want to come on vacation. They're doing their own thing. They're not like, hey, we're now best friends. Let's hang out together.
I loved it. It was so sweet. I just was not in the mental space to do that when we're on a road trip trying to get home as fast as possible. But I get it. Both of you are right. Give people their space. Let them come to you. But I was like, somebody's inviting me to do something. My inner extrovert wants to participate.
Also, you're like, I don't want to make them feel bad that I'm not doing this thing with them.
I love the Bible.
And that's exactly what a host should not do, is make you feel bad for not doing something. That is very kind of you. And the review is very kind. I think to Courtney's point, we have to feel them out for communication and what they feel comfortable with. But what matters most is when they message you to be prompt in your response back, because it sets the relationship up to be one that they can trust you, that you're going to have the answers to their questions, that you are reliable, and it gives that credibility that sometimes people fear by going through Airbnb instead of a hotel or a chain. But what it offers is the connection in asking them questions about the area. If you have young kids, asking questions about the house, if there's anything to be aware of, you can really use those messages back and forth to be to your advantage. If you have questions, feel free to ask. That's something for those that are listening. It's like, you may not have an Airbnb, right? But staying at Airbnbs, please message the hosts as much as you can if you have questions so that you feel secure in that. Airbnb wants that, as Courtney said, to be a super host, you have to have a good response rate. So they want responses from the hosts.
I like how you said the communication initially up front creates trust, because people sometimes can be skeptical about, what am I going to get out of this Airbnb? When I get there, is the door going to unlock? How is this going to work? Because it's not like a hotel that you can just walk in and you have the person at the front get you to your room and everything goes smoothly. I think that's a concern that people sometimes have with Airbnb. And so when you have someone who communicates with you right away and the response time is good, it makes you feel comfort in being like, yes, I can book with them.
That's something that's really nice about Airbnb, is that it's not just a hotel where maybe you have a phone that you try to call down on and it feels really disconnected. You hope to have a good time, but hey, the hotel, if you have a bad experience, it's just like a drop in the basket. They've got so many people coming in and out. They're not too concerned with your personal experience. Whereas in Airbnb, those reviews matter, man. The Airbnb host is really working to have a good review and to keep good reviews coming.
I understand that this episode isn't necessarily a how to host your own Airbnb, but I really love something that Courtney has told me in the past about how she overcame that decision fatigue of figuring out what to get for her Airbnb, whether it be a duvet or a quilt or whatnot for the beds. So Courtney, could you talk a little bit about how you were able to overcome the mental gymnastics you were going through as you tried to make final decisions for your Airbnb?
Yeah, there were just so many decisions to make that it became exhausting for me. By the end of the project, I told Garrett that I'm definitely having a 3-month break where I will not even consider making one of our properties an Airbnb because I have to decompress from this first one. But now that I can see how difficult I made it for myself by the stop and go of working through something and then not being able to decide what bathroom tile, and spending a week being like, should I do this one? Should I do that one? And then getting to throw pillows. And I've bought 50 different throw pillows and I've been to the store back and forth, buying and returning. All this time I was just wasting by not being able to make an executive decision and just move forward. And so at the end of all of this, bless my husband's patient heart, we were going over it, and it probably took us about 6 months from start to finish to actually getting our property listed. when it really could have taken us 3 months. And I spent so much time, like I said, buying and returning and trying to save $50 here and $20 there and $100 here. And, oh, I'm going to try to buy something on Marketplace. Now I'm going to change this couch and this doesn't feel how I want. I just was so back and forth that I couldn't even see that we just kept losing money. The more I was trying to save $25 here, we could have been renting the place out for hundreds of dollars a night. And so one of the other lessons that I would give to someone who was starting an Airbnb would be to just make decisions and move forward and try not to get caught up in the small things, because the faster you get the project done, you are making so much more money on getting it rented out.
I think that's an awesome tidbit and a piece of advice in general too, because when you get so focused on those little details, sometimes you're forgetting the big picture. Speaking of pictures, when I look at the pictures of your Airbnb, I'm like, dang, it looks good. So bravo on picking all the beautiful things, because your house does look fantastic. I know it was a lot of time and effort to get there, but it is so picture perfect. And I can't wait to stay in there one day. But I think that's a good lesson for life, that sometimes you get so hyper focused on those little decisions that you can't move forward. That's a really great lesson to remember, to just move forward, because there are opportunity costs. You're losing out on something by taking so much time thinking about those fine details. And I think that goes along with our vacation plans too. As a guest of an Airbnb, guests oftentimes will really spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, well, where on my road trip do I need to make this stop? And do I book it here or there? And you overthink it. And sometimes you just need to make a decision.
Yeah, make a decision, or at least take a first step. Within Airbnb, as I mentioned before, you can message a host, or you can ask questions. So you can ask the host, hey, we're interested in this Airbnb for this. And if it's not really a time sensitive thing, if that host wanted to later and it were still available, they could offer a discount for the place. So that's something to know. But if you never message them to ask a question about it, they would never be able to opt to maybe even give you a discount. There's that other side as a host. If you want the place booked and you'd rather have it booked than be empty, and somebody had messaged you about that weekend, then they would definitely want you to book it. Also, if a place is listed, it might be valued really high, but if they had just listed it, it's 20% off. Typically, a host can decide what rate they want to have it discounted in order to get better reviews, hopefully. So you can look at an area that you're traveling to and see if there are any diamonds in the rough there, like cost-wise, and that there are those different tiers in an area of pricing, and you might have one that fits within your budget. So if you've never used Airbnb, you can set the parameters within the search to know how much you want to spend per night. You have to factor in the cleaning costs and things too. At the end, there are some additional costs by using Airbnb as a platform, but overall, you get that security in the booking as well. There's really not a lot of risk, and you can talk directly to the host, which is a really cool thing that you wouldn't be able to with a hotel.
It's true. Courtney and Carley, I'll pose this question to both of y'all. What do people like me not know about Airbnbs that we should know?
We've been talking about this already, but you're really just dealing with completely individualized places. The listings are all posted by either individuals like my husband and I, or Carly, or it could be from a property management company. But either way, with a property manager or an individual who owns the house, you're communicating with a person, and they get to set the preferences for what their Airbnb looks like. So you have the chance to set your own calendar. You can block out dates. We have it set up where we have a day blocked off before and after everybody books. That way, we make sure that there's no cleaning problems, and it just gives us a buffer between guests. Some people will have their set, like someone checks out at 11 and someone checks in at 3. For us, I'm like, ooh, that makes me nervous if something went wrong. So we like to have an extra day. It also gives us the chance, going to what you were saying, Carly, if you just communicate with the host, sometimes we'll have that day between people, and someone might message us and be like, hey, I see that you have, the 12th open, but not the 11th. We were thinking of coming into the 11th. Is there any way you can make that work? And then as a host, you have the chance to be like, oh, hey, yeah, let me just contact the cleaning people and we'll make sure that it's clean by the time that you come. So you can set things up like that.
That is genius. I've never thought to message somebody when I see that they're open other days. I just figure, oh, it's booked. I didn't realize there was a day that hosts paused their rentals so that they could clean.
If you want.
That's awesome.
You don't have to. Not all people do. But yeah.
That's cool to know, because I've chosen not to rent certain places because it shows that it wasn't available for one of the 3 days that I needed it. So we've chosen someplace else. Maybe now I can go back to some of those that would have been my plan A, because I can now message them and say, hey, is there a possibility? That's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah, it's never a bad idea to just check in. We've had people ask us a variety of different questions, like trying to get in earlier. And there are settings that you can have where you're like, there's no early check-in. Like, we have our code set to start working at 3 p.m. So we have to go in and change it if people come early. We don't want people to think that they can just check in early all the time. But every time people have asked, we usually allow it. We want people to have a good experience. And we know that traveling, sometimes you get there earlier than you expected, or there's that weird time from the airport before you can check in and you're not sure what to do with all of your luggage. We recently had this experience when we went to go to an Airbnb, but we couldn't get in yet. And we just had all of our luggage in the back of a truck and we went in to eat dinner. And I was like, someone's going to steal 12 suitcases. I was super panicked about it. And so we understand what it's like. And so I don't mind letting people come in early if they need to. I think just realizing the hosts are people. Most of the time, I like to think good people who want to accommodate you and help you out. And so I think that if you communicate with the host, they might change. Like the number of people per place, you can choose how many people are allowed to stay in your place. We have a 2-bedroom place. We say that 6 people can be in there. But if someone has asked us before, can a 7th person stay too? I don't really care. I'm like, you know what? You can. You're going to have to be on the blow up air mattress. It might not be what ideally you would want to sleep on, but if you want to do that, you're fine. Whereas I just had a friend with the exact same experience and they had one more person added to their group. And the host was like, nope, sorry. Like, we max out at 6. Absolutely not. You're going to have to find another place. So you'll find the strictness of people is different. And you can find some of that information out from the reviews. So go and check out the reviews if you see a profile that you like and see what people say about them. And then also just ask questions, because the hosts are all different. They're all just individual people. So they have things that they care about or don't care about, pets or no pets. Like, I'm a no pet kind of gal.
Yeah.
We have a dog that I wish we didn't have. I'm so mean. And it's brand new. I don't want the dog scratching anything. I don't want cats. I don't want hair. I don't want any of that. So I say no. So we have missed out on people. Garrett's like, we would get so many more people if you would let animals. But I'm like, I can't do it. Mostly the profile's filled out and you'll find a lot of information. All the accommodations, like what the house is going to be like if you just research. But if you have any questions, people are hosting for a reason. This is more of like a customer service kind of thing, you know, so they're willing to respond to you and I think help you out.
Totally. And I think it's better definitely to ask permission than forgiveness on this. Always ask permission. And it's funny about the pet rule. We had someone ask us about our Airbnb and they asked about the backyard and what that was like. It's very clear that it's a no pet, no cat, no service dogs, nothing. And there were these vague questions about what the backyard was like and if there was a side yard. And I said, yes, we have a small backyard. Do you have a pet? They're like, yes. It was just funny that they were trying to skirt the rule a little bit. I'm like, we do live on the property, just so you know.
Right.
But with that, if you're asking questions, I feel like the host will be more likely to work with you also if you have reviews, if you have some social credibility on your Airbnb profile. So it helps to have other good reviews to verify that you're a good person, that you don't leave a wreck in the places and that you're easy to work with. And a picture is always helpful. So when Airbnb prompts you to add identification, verification things, do that because it just helps the host feel more connected to you. Although I've also had people who did not have any of those things and asked me questions And I was totally fine with walking them through because they needed that kind of extra attention in those times too. So it's important to just be clear and be open about what your needs are, because it goes back to the trust.
That's a great point to bring up. On the opposite of hosting and having our profile and trying to get you to come stay at our place, we also want to know that the guests that we are letting stay in our place are going to take care of our places. You guys, as a guest, are able to rate and give a review to us as a host, and we also are able to give you a rating as a guest. Airbnb is not like where you might think, hey, I'm like at a hotel and we're being irresponsible and not cleaning up after ourselves, and we're going to leave and housekeeping is going to clean it up after, and you don't really care. Airbnb, we get to leave a review on you. So you want to be sure that you take care of people's property and treat it like you would your own house, because we're able to give you reviews. And like you were saying, it makes us feel more comfortable as hosts when you have a profile. I do like seeing someone and looking at their reviews and being like, oh, all these other hosts say that they are great guests, that they take care of stuff. They're easy to communicate with. And a picture does make a difference. Having a picture just makes you feel like it's a real person. That I just always feel like when you can see and communicate with people, anything can be worked out. And so I think keep that in mind as a guest. If you didn't know that, when you create your profile and you stay somewhere, you get reviewed. So take care of stuff. And you might not know this. Airbnb's hosts can ask you for a deposit before your stay. That way, if something gets broken or misplaced or something, they will just take it out of your deposit. So going back to that Florida trip, this is the most recent one we went on. We, I think, lost a couple of sand chairs. We had left them out. They got stolen and a couple boogie boards broke. So they just took that out of our deposit so they could replace it, which totally makes sense and is totally fair. If you break it, you got to buy it. It's going to come out of your deposit. And you do have to make a deposit beforehand, but don't be nervous. Like most of the time, we've given it back to everybody because they're good guests and take care of this stuff. And so don't be afraid about having that extra charge as you go through and you're like, wait, this didn't calculate right. There also can be a cleaning fee. Some hosts just wrap it into their pricing, so the cleaning fee's in it, and some people charge an additional cleaning fee. We have a cleaning company that goes and cleans ours between places, so we just actually tack on to whether you're staying for 2 nights or you're staying for 10 nights, it's the same fee. You're paying a cleaning fee for them to come in and clean after you leave.
I think this whole time we've been talking about that communication on Airbnb, just like Courtney and I had the Facebook Marketplace episode where we were talking about going back and forth with people and the way to optimize the experience. If you get to a place and you find that things are not according to what the listing has described, that's the opportunity to message them and to state what your concern is. If something is not working, I would say, hey, this thing is not working right now, or we've had trouble with the door not working. We've had an Airbnb where the air conditioning went out while we were there, and we had to tell them, sorry, and instead of just being in there and be like, oh my gosh, it didn't work the whole time, and then giving a bad review at the end, you can say, this is what's going on. And depends on the situation, how bad of the thing it was. They could also opt to refund you a portion of the money. So like you said, if you were to break something, it would be part of your deposit that would be taken out. The same thing goes for if the Airbnb is not as it has been described, then it is possible that you could have some money back. So if that just helps ease your mind a little bit, that if you get to an Airbnb and you feel disappointed because something is not working correctly, like the function of things is not as it should be, or the cleanliness is not where it needs to be, take pictures, send it to them, be very even keeled on it. No need to get super extreme really fast, but do notify them as soon as possible. Give them an opportunity to fix the situation. If they have not fixed the situation, then you can go further with it. But again, a good host will want that good review. And you've probably done your due diligence beforehand to see that they were a good host, so they'll make it right. And so that's just something to keep in mind too. That communication is so valuable with Airbnb.
I love that point. I want to say really fast. We went to Outback Steakhouse recently, and it was interesting because the table next to us, there was a lady who ate her meal and then at the end of the meal told the waitress that she was dissatisfied with the steak that she'd ordered. And it was so funny because they had the manager come out and talk to her. And he was like, so you ordered medium well and you're saying it was not medium well. And she'd left one little bite left to prove that it wasn't good. And she was like, I'm just not satisfied with it. And he's like, well, tell you what, I'll go make you another steak. It will be medium well. And she was like, no, you can just take this one off the bill. And he's like, oh, no, I want to make sure that you're satisfied. We're going to get you a medium well steak. It was so funny to overhear because I'm going,
oh, golly.
This lady, I mean, she'd done this before. I mean, you could just tell. And my husband and I are just so awkward. I was sitting there panicking because I'm like, this is going to go down. I don't like this. Anyway, like with an Airbnb, same thing. While you're actually having the experience, speak up instead of waiting until the end to post a picture and be like, see, this was bad.
Make it clear that you're going for the experience, that you're not wanting money. This isn't just an opportunity to be like, hey, look, it's broken. Refund me the whole trip. That's not how it works. But give them an opportunity to remedy the situation. Definitely. Sisters, this is part of the podcast. We say at the beginning, each time that we talk about self-awareness, don't be that person. Don't be the Outback Steakhouse lady. So, Courtney, are there any other personal philosophies or rules you live by as a host or as a guest?
I'm just a big believer in the idea that we create our own feelings and outcomes by what we choose to think about our circumstances. I just like to choose to have a good time no matter what. If you're hosting people or if you are on a vacation, just try to have a good time. We've talked earlier in this podcast about the details that go into planning things. You worked hard to make this vacation fun, like have a good time, or the people that you're hosting that are coming to visit you. You obviously love them or you wouldn't have invited them to your house. So have fun, or you wouldn't be an Airbnb host if you didn't like communicating with people. Just make the best of it. I'm going to share an experience with you back to this same trip in Florida. Sorry, all my ideas have come from this last trip. We originally were supposed to be staying in an Airbnb that we had booked that had 5 rooms. So each person in Garrett's family, we all had an individual room that we were going to be able to stay in with our families, which was still going to be a little tight. We'd be sleeping with our little kids, or all the kids could sleep in the living room. Anyway, 4 days before the vacation, something happened and that was no longer available. So we were in a scramble trying to find a place to stay. There was nothing available except for my brother-in-law is from Florida. He knew someone who had a 2-bedroom, 1,200 square foot place. And obviously they don't let tons of people stay there usually, but because he knew him, he was like, please, man, we are in a bind. Can we stay here? We put 23 people in a super tiny Airbnb for our trip. That could have ruined everything. Picture in your mind, 0 space on the floor when everybody's asleep. You walk in the door and there's the living room that leads to the kitchen. And then there's 2 bedrooms and the only bathrooms are in the bedrooms. So we had people sleeping on the couch, and then we just bought air mattresses, and there was just one air mattress after another all the way from the living room to the kitchen. The people in the rooms, you just had to let people in your room to go to the bathroom. Everyone's trying to shower. 23 people. We're at the beach. We're showering every day. It's not even a vacation where you're like, oh, it's fine. I can get away with not showering for a couple days. It could have been a total nightmare, but we just made it work. And it was fine. Of course, there were times that we were like, man, this is crammed. This would be really great to have some space. Everybody just chose to make it work. And we had so much fun. And the beach was great. And when it came down to it, we weren't there a ton. We were out and about. So I just think we could have had a terrible experience and been like, oh, this was horrible. And we spent all this money flying to Florida with all of our families. And we decided to have fun. So I think that if you've chosen to go on a vacation, if you've chosen to have people come visit you, just make the best of it. It's not forever. It's all temporary. You're going to leave the vacation at some point. Your guests that are annoying you are going to leave at some point. It is not permanent. You can totally deal with it. Have a good attitude and try to have fun.
Amen. I love that. So, Courtney, as you know, we end our podcast with a call to action that our sisters can apply this week. Give us something creative. What can our sisters do here to apply everything that we've talked about within this Airbnb umbrella?
I've got a tier of calls to action today based on your experience with Airbnb. So if you have never tried an Airbnb, my call to action to you is to download the app and just browse, see what's around your area, or look at a place that you may want to visit sometime and just see what they have. Just open your world to Airbnb. If you have a vacation coming up where you've booked an Airbnb, my call to action is to leave a review. I know we talked about this in the episode, how valuable reviews are. I honestly am the person that never leaves a review, good or bad. I barely even check my email. There's no way I'm logging in and leaving a review. I just don't do that. It's not me. But now I love all those kind people who choose to leave reviews. When I get the Amazon emails, review this product, I'm always like, no, I'm definitely not. But then I always read the reviews. I'm terrible like that. So I'm realizing that leaving reviews is very helpful and very kind. You have a 14-day window, I think, to submit a review. Just consider doing it. If you had a good time, then say the things that you enjoyed about being there. The last one. If you are interested in becoming an Airbnb host, then just figure out what your next step is to make it happen. If you're like, hey, we have a rental property right now, but we want to do Airbnb, what would we need to do to make that happen? Look at that next step. Or if you are in a place where you've finished all of the house and it's set up how you want, all right, what do I need to do to create my online profile? Just take whatever next step it is to make it happen for you.
I love all of that so much. What a great tiered call to action plan that is. So applicable for every stage of vacation goer. Sisters, we'd love to hear your progress with Courtney's call to action this week. So be on the lookout for our roll call post this week, where we will invite you to comment with your progress on this call to action or any previous call to action if you're playing catch up on prior episodes. You can find our roll call and other fun engagement posts on Instagram at the Hey Sister Podcast and at facebook.com/HeySisterPodcast. You'll find those links in the show notes today. And also in the show notes, look for the link to Courtney's Airbnb in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Carley's Airbnb in Waco, Texas, if you'd like to stay with either of them in the future. Courtney, thanks again for joining us today. It's been such a treat to talk to you. It's amazing how much of a real conversation we can have when we aren't being interrupted by our little ones, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Well, we've loved it so much. Sisters, thanks for answering our call this week. We'll look forward to talking to all y'all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Thank you so much, Courtney. I won't call you Court. Golly.
Fine, you can.
No, I hate it when people call me Court, except for Carley. So I don't know why I just did that. Okay.
This was fun to engage with adults, right? Instead of being with my children.
Well, we've loved it so much.
That sounded terrible.
No, you sounded perfect.
I hate my children. That's what it sounded like.
No, it didn't.